Hi there, this is a longer video about the nature, the flora and fauna on Brownsea Island. If you like a shorter praising version of the nature of Brownsea, try this link that's appeared at the top. I've also done an unlisted video about the castle, both the ins and outs of it. Of course, before all that, we've got to get here. So one of the advantages of staying on the island is we can go out before the ferries come and once they've gone. So we're just off on one of our several walks before breakfast. Come here often. Rude. There's plenty of gull and tern action from here. The black-headed gull getting begged for food here has just come in. Nice shot of the common terns. I guess these must be nesting. There's another hide a bit further around and we've got a gull guard of honour. Does smell very birdy. This is one of my absolute favourites, this marsh samphire, and you can find it down the runway to one of the hides on the lagoon. It's one of two samphires that I've found on the island. We've also got rock samphire growing in the castle grounds, and I've not seen too much of this around the rest of the island. Sandwich tern here. This is a look back from the pathway to the second hide with the castle as reference. Now we're around at the Wildlife Trust Centre. This feeder, you quite often get red squirrels on it, but we've got grey-lag geese and mallards today. This mallard's come up to us, totally shameless. We've managed to see this little cheeky chap eat as we've turned for the castle. We're coming back a slightly different way. This is a vast expanse of reeds here, and the trees in here typically are silver birch, willow and alder. Deer feeding sign here. Big lot of western skunk cabbage here. We get this on the river near us, but it's about a third of the size of this. You get the non-coniferous woodland, and then suddenly, which the red squirrels need through there, you get the coniferous stuff, which is the Scots pine. And we've just reached the rather large lily pond, which we're going to just bypass. Just on the edge of the lily pond there's a mum with a little duckling just stuck under her. Okay, we'll leave you alone now. I stopped for some footage of them, and of course they come running over. Just for the record, these are the peacocks. And look at this, what a chance encounter. We're now heading towards the Scout Stone, and we're just starting to border on a little bit of heathland here. And here's your typical heathland combination of gorse, bracken and heather. It's gorgeous. Quick shot of the scout camp, of the sort of group totem poles if you like. This is a shot from inside the visitor centre on the main part of the island. Not far from the church. There's actually one of these exclosures in the castle grounds as well. And just reading the sign, what it is, it's one that'll let just rabbits in and one that'll let just seeker deer in. And the idea is to see the impact of them on the island. It's always a nice time to come down in the morning and see the sea before it starts getting chopped up by the activity on it. Because Brownsea is the largest of 8 islands in this area. It's about 1.5 miles long by 3/4 wide. And now we're just on the way back checking what the tide's washed in, you know, seaweeds and shells and bits of crab and whatnot. Along with the peacocks, this is one of the island's noisier inhabitants. This is an oyster catcher. Just chanced upon these holes here. I wonder if it's where the oyster catcher's been looking for something, because the tide has actually only just receded this morning, so they're fresh. There we go, we're on the home straight now. Just stream of terns going back over the castle to the lagoon with fish. So the island's actually jointly operated by both the National Trust and the Dorset Wildlife Trust as well. The latter is more for the lagoon. And obviously we're here as one of 130,000 visitors that come each year. It's an absolutely brilliant sight to come to, even if it's just for a day. So having been out in the stillness of the morning, we're now at the stage where everyone's made their way to the last of the ferries and the stillness has descended on the island again. You can almost just feel it. So I'm starting to lose the light now. I've got my trail cam out and it'll be out every night. Green woodpecker here. And you know what, it wouldn't be a Flora and Fauna video without a shot of some ants. There are a lot of bat boxes on the island because there's actually 11 species of bat found here. Blow me, look at this, just inside the gate I found a little, I think it's a pipistrelle bat on the wall. Lovely morning, another walk coming up. And a glorious early morning over the lagoon as well. This is one of the nice things about coming to somewhere other than your local area. You discover new things, and this is common marsh bedstraw, which is a new one to me. We have a cormorant looking for its breakfast along the castle shoreline. We're now out for a mid-morning walk. This is the western tip of the island. So over there we've just come past the scout camp, and just coming up over here is the Maryland village, or remains of it. Just walking past Brotherston Copse, fenced off, and you can see that there's been no graze line from the deer in here because of that. So now we're heading parallel to the north side, and it is all really tall bracken and Scots pine, almost exclusively. And not surprisingly, amongst all this Scots pine, there's lots of squirrel feeding sign. While I'm out and about, I'm going to grab some of these. These are going to bait the trail cam for the red squirrels, but I'm going to put something in them. That's what I mean, it's sort of like this. And this is the old vinery, more towards the north side of the island. This ridged area is actually where they were growing daffodils at the turn of the 1900s. There was actually a business selling them in Covent Garden. And they still come up apparently if the seeker deer don't get them. Poole's actually one of the biggest natural harbours in the world, and you'll see in the next bit of footage just how close big ships can actually come to the island. This one, to be precise. So close it almost looks surreally close. This is the viewpoint that you can access quite easily from the National Trust area. Bit of raptor action here. I've got a buzzard out in the late evening as I'm going to go and put the trail cam in. Hear that? Most nights when we're out and about looking for nature after tea in the castle, we hear the actors and actresses over in this setup over here. They're practicing the Shakespearean play, and they're going to be inviting guests onto the island in a week or two's time. It's quite surreal. This is a young wren in the rushes. This is a quick shot inside the villa, the little visitor centre on the actual reserve itself. This is a Dorset Wildlife Trust one. This is the walk on the hill near the villa, which is going to overlook the lagoon stroke sea. And this is somewhere between north and northeast. I rounded the corner and wondered what this tree was, thinking it's some kind of sprucey type thing, and when you look at the top, it's a Scots pine with ivy climbing up it. And as we start to make the descent down the hill, here's a tiny reminder of the ever constant risk of fire on the island. And on the back of that, here's the island's fire engine. Just off out to put the trail cam out to try and capture some red squirrel footage. I'm just going to leave you with a little montage from a previous visit where I captured a red squirrel stripping the bark off a sweet chestnut tree. Now, in bushcraft terms, sweet chestnut bark buffs up really nicely to make good tinder for lighting fires. So I assumed it was taking it for a dray. Did it know that it buffs up well, or was it a chance encounter where it saw some loose bark? This is about as close as the sea actually comes in, tide-wise. The tide's on the turn, so we're just going to take you for a little walk around the beach. In the meantime, I'll put this little montage up of a seeker deer from a previous visit that decided to come in for a paddle with us near the castle. Come out from the castle and turn right. This is the castle's beach, and it's mainly sort of gravelly stones and sand. You can see there's not much difference with the longshore drift on the sand levels here, and it shelves out quite a long way. I went out to my neck earlier for a swim and counted 40 paces back to the coast, and the tide is actually going from right to left. And as well as seeing various bits of pottery on the beach about now, you can also see the clay as well. We leave the castle's beach, we start to see the sort of quite little cliffs that we've got towards the scout camp entrance. We've now reached the southerly point of the island, and the high cliff-like area is now given way to a lower part. Now at the southwest point, we'll have a little pan round back from where we've come from. Starting to hit proper wet clay now on the beach, and you can tell it is clay because when you run your finger down it leaves a smooth channel with no rips or tears. Interestingly, someone else further along the coast has got the same idea and made a little pot. Coming out with my family here, but they've taken the exit to the scout camp as a place to tap out, and I don't blame them because the beach from sort of here on in isn't the most accommodating if you're wanting to walk on it or sit on it, because it's a lot of bricks and a lot of pottery now. Now, apart from seeing the seeker deer and the red squirrels, I was just going to take what Brownsea threw my way nature-wise, because obviously I'm on a family holiday and I can't be too demanding. I did have this plant, however, on my list to see. It's thorn apple. The reason it's on my list of things to see is this is the first place I ever saw it, and it's near the scout camp, which I know is still in the same position because I can see the Union flag over my shoulder. I think the only thing it's useful for is the nice white flowers. I don't think it's got any other use, but I'm glad I've seen it. I'm pretty much at the westerly point, and just for reference, this is Brownsea Island. The pottery is really building up because we're not far from the actual jetty that supplied Maryland where it was made. Just shows how much of this produced pottery went to waste. It's actually buried, and you can see where this bank's eroded, where it's all coming out. We're pointing about northwest now, and that's the pottery pier there, long since disused because it's not in very good condition. And now I'm on the home straight. Mercifully the pottery's dropped back down, so the going's a little better. It's not surprising there's so much tree debris on the actual coast when you look how precarious some of their routes are. So my journey's been brought to a premature end because they're doing a lot of work on the island at the moment. So you can see this bit's closed off, but I can't go much further anyway because you've got the lagoon and the nature reserve. So I'm going to jolly well tap out and go back to the castle for a beer. Now, just before I start heading back and to catch a breather, because I've got some big steps to climb here, I want to say a big thank you to the DERC, who are based in Dorset, and they keep a record of all the nature that's been seen on the island. Everything from birds to bivalves and versions thereof. They sent me a list of what they've seen on here, and the current entry list is 5,077 things. It's amazing. I'm back. That beer is calling. Oh yes. While Scots pine is arguably the dominant tree species on the island, there are a lot of other species that you see a lot of, including hazel, spruce, beech, Monterey pine, which has huge cones. As an example, that's the Scots pine cone, and that's a Monterey pine cone. Silver and the little downy birch, holly, alder, mainly in the wetter areas, sycamore, poplar, various willows, peduncular oak, rowan, hawthorn, and sweet chestnut amongst others. Now this land I'm in at the moment is actually the castle grounds, and there's about 17 acres. There's supposed to be about 60 varieties of tree on the island, of which about 2/3 can be found within the grounds. Having just listed all the trees that you see in profusion on the island, I've got to make an exception for this one. This is my favourite tree. This is the wild service tree. Okay, and coming up is some of the footage I've got of the sika deer. They've come from the Far East. The last part of their Latin name is Nippon, and they can swim, and that's how they got here. This is our first daylight sighting of sika deer, and there's a little young in there as well, which is nice. Oh, a little pronk as well. We're being stared at here. So let's have a little look at the footage I've got of the red squirrels that are on the island. Obviously one of the jewels in the crown for it. Very active early in the morning, and very active sort of in the cooler evening as well, but apparently they don't like the heat during the day. Good morning, squirrel. As you can hear in the camera, I've got my back to the lagoon at the moment. I'm on the boardwalks. I just spotted this little fella. Caught this one having his tea. There's one of the island's rabbits. Not a lot of dragonflies about, but while this little one's sitting and perching, taking in the sun, I'll film him. There's usually a lot of damselflies as well. In terms of butterflies, the most popular one I've seen is the gatekeeper, which we have here. And a 6-spot burnout on the moth front. On the Flora front, you're going to see a whole lot of reeds, blackberry brambles, soft rushes, ragwort. The classic type with ragwort here, you've got cinnabar caterpillars. There's also some ants on there, but there's also some cardinal beetles too. Various thistles, bracken, bird's foot trefoil, fleabane, gorse, heather and rhododendrons. A lot of them were ripped out when the island was reverted back to the care of the National Trust in the 60s, because the last owner had let the island go to rack and ruin, and they were everywhere, almost an impenetrable barrier. This isn't actually on Brownsea, but this gives you an idea of what it must have been like getting back onto the island. I'll have a look over and under the waves, and we'll start with this little bad boy. And just to finish off, this is just a small selection of the various shells that I've found on the actual castle beach, and it seems to me to suggest quite a healthy state of the water. Just from the fungus angle on the island, it's not the best weather or season to be trying to find it, but I have found a lot of green elf cup and the following other fungus. The old dependable birch polypore, artist bracket fungus, parasols. One thing Brownsea is famous for in the night time is its nightjars. But because the biting insects are out there on the heathland, we're going to go well prepared. So, having got dressed up to look like a ninja, we are now heading out to the nightjar site. It's over the far side of the island near the scout camp. It's where all the heath is. We can hear them cheering, but we've just got to wait till they get in the sky. So it's one of those days where it's more churring than flying, but yeah, they're out here in numbers, but so are the mosquitoes, so we're heading back now. On the way back from the nightjars, we thought we'd have a look for the glowworms, which is something I've never seen when I've been here, and it looks like another fruitless visit, but that's nature. Last night we were just going to go and see the nightjars again, see if we can get some more action in, but there's 100% totally unexpected thunderstorm starting to kick off, so we're heading home. This is the morning after the very brief storm we had, and normally in the morning it's flat, but this is flat. This is one of several gun emplacements from the Second World War on the island in the castle grounds. There's also a bunker too, the entrance to which might or might not be this. But over there, just in the distance, you can't really see it in the film, but there's actually a ventilation shaft, or it certainly looks like it. But anyway, it was used to control the mines out at sea and could be used to explode them if needs be. So this was the last trail cam of the holiday. We're going back today, which is obviously a bit of a downer, but if you've watched this far, thank you very much. And what I'm going to do is put some footage of a talk that the Dorset Wildlife Trust did for castle guests around the reserve after hours, which is very interesting. And then I'm going to put some footage from the trail cam up after that. Enjoy.
If you come up here in the morning, early morning, before it gets too hot, there's often lizards on these logs, and at the moment it's so hot they'll be off doing other stuff. They won't be around really, but I did hear a rustle then. Where did that come from? So we've got common lizards that live in these log piles, so they'll be breeding in there as well. So there'll be, there might be some youngsters starting to appear soon, tiny little things like that, but the adults are actually kind of they can be about that big, so they're not, you know, they're not small things. And they actually nest and breed in these log piles here, and obviously hide in there and hibernate over the winter as well. So it's a good spot. If, like I said, if you're walking up in the morning before it gets too boiling hot, you might see them basking, getting ready to go off for the day to do their feeding. But when it's this hot, they're more likely just to be off. They eat ants and little insects and stuff like that, so they're more likely to be off doing what lizards do. These log piles have also got wrens nesting in them, so you see lots of other stuff going on. There's frogs in there, there's all sorts of stuff in there. Always something different, you never know what you're going to run into walking up there. Which is yeah, it's lovely. So yeah, so we've just come up the boardwalk, so now we're on our side of the island, so everything the other side of Middle Street is National Trust land, with the exception of the church. and all of this on this side is ours. So in front of us here we've got the lagoon, which is probably the jewel in the crown actually on the lagoon, on the reserve. At the moment it's quite busy. We've got the black-headed gulls and sandwich terns and common terns all nesting. It is coming to the end of their nesting season, so it's not half as chaotic as it was a couple of weeks ago. Believe me, it was much louder than this a couple of weeks ago. They are kind of, we will see some of them on the islands, but most of them are starting to spread around, so they're starting to fly. The chicks are actually getting quite big, so they're flying mostly. The gold chicks have started to disperse, but the terns are just a bit behind. They have to build up their energy to fly down to Africa in a few weeks' time, so they're doing everything they can to eat as much as they can and put on weight before they go. So the lagoon itself, it wasn't actually built as a sort of haven for wildlife that we see today. It was built to create an area of farmland. So the wall was actually built in the 1800s by a gentleman called Colonel Waugh, who bought the island, and he saw this was an open bay to the sea. So the sea was coming up, right up here, right up to the castle wall pretty much sometimes. And it was just a sort of open marshy bay. So he saw this area and he thought, you know what, I could do that. I could build a wall all the way around. It's a lovely flat area. I can build up the soil level and I'll make it into farmland. So that's what he did. He had the wall built, which is 1 kilometre long. He had the area drained with wind pumps, and then the soil levels were built up. So it was all a lovely flat area of farmland. So if you'd been stood here in the 1850s, you would have had nothing but farmland in front of you. You would have had sort of cattle grazing, people working on the land. There would have been fences running along, irrigation ditches, all sorts of stuff going on. So a completely different landscape. This looks like quite a lovely lush reed bed going on here. In the middle though, just a couple of weeks ago, it was total chaos of nesting black-headed gulls. So we had about 300 black-headed gulls in there. The only reason they've been able to do that is because the deer, so we have Japanese sika deer, as you've just seen that one over there, they're quite happy in water. And what they do is, as well as being partial to orchids, they rather like reeds. So they'll go through at night and they graze the reed bed. And what they've actually done is graze the centre of the reed bed until there's nothing left there. It's not reeds anymore. It's more like this, basically sort of swamp with these sort of patches of rush in there. So it looks like a healthy green reed bed, but what they've actually done is left the privacy screen around the outside so we can't see what they're up to. If you were to look from above, an aerial shot, you'd see the whole middle is hollowed out, and that's the reason that the gulls have been able to move in. So we were seeing it as a negative thing. We were trying to restore the reed bed, we were doing all sorts of experiments of how we could fence it, etc, etc. But what we've actually decided to do now is go the other way and create some ponds and scrapes in there for ducks and waders and things like that, and leave it, because the gulls have taken over. The last 4 or 5 years we're now getting 300 gulls nesting in there, and it's their patch now. We're not going to take it back from them. So this was a crater created in the Second World War when the island was actually a decoy for Poole Harbour. So over the other side there you've got Poole, quite an important area with factories and all sorts of other stuff. Obviously they didn't want it to be bombed. So the island, Mrs. One and Christy was living here at the time, she offered her island up as a decoy. So what happened is, when the first sort of wave of planes came over, they would drop a sort of pyrotechnic flare to mark where the next wave should drop the bombs. Should any of them land on Poole, they were extinguished and they were relit here by a team of brave people, I have to say, who then became the target for the bombs. So the next lot of German bombers would come over and drop the bombs where they thought the target was, bearing in mind everything was in blackout. Creating lots of bomb craters on the island. So 150 tons of bombs, something like that, fell on and around the island.